Welcome to episode 1 of Truth in Food. Here's your host, John Robert Sutton. My name is Swedish Egil, and I'll be interviewing John today. Welcome, John. How you doing?
Awesome. Very well.
Great to meet up with you. I can't wait to get into this. And what is Truth in Food?
Truth in Food is essentially the 30 years of travel I've gone all over the world and finding authenticity of where these products come from. And all the myths, all the things that you have thought about food, so many are untrue. And this show is about people, places, and things that have to do with the reality of what you're putting in your mouth.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Can't wait to learn more about that. So what can your audience expect from you and Truth in Food in the upcoming weeks?
I'm going to take people on a journey, and it's a personal journey of people, places, and things describing the reality of what you're putting in your mouth and your brain. So when you think about it, the only thing that you really can control, can't control your genes, you can't control where you came from, you can close your eyes, but you don't want to live that way, is taking your two hands and what you put in your mouth. Think about that. That's really the only thing you can control, is what you take in your two hands and put in your mouth. And that is sacred. And you need to know what that is, because I guarantee you a lot of you aren't even thinking about that.
Right, exactly. And a lot of other people are telling you that this is good for you. It may not be. You need to know the real truth behind the food you're putting in your mouth.
That's right. And there are 3 people that are doing that every single day, and that's the Colonel, the King, and the Clown. And all 3 of them are bombarding you on what to do.
Right, exactly. So now, you're a food archaeologist. What does that mean, and what do you do?
Okay, what that means is I have sold hundreds of products into some of the largest retailers on earth: Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Walmart, distribution companies. I go around the world and find really the root of where food comes from. For instance, let's take vanilla. Vanilla is not from Madagascar.
From Manila?
And it's not from Manila, and it's not from Tahiti. But Tahitian vanilla sounds better than Mexican vanilla. Do you know that vanilla comes from one valley in Mexico, one city? Wow. It's called Papantla. And it's high up in the mountains, and vanilla is an orchid. And the vanilla bean is the stamina out of the flower of an orchid. That's what vanilla is. And for years and years and years, only a little fly could pollinate the orchid plants. They really didn't know how to do it. Someone discovered it, carted it off to Madagascar, cut thousands of acres and tens of thousands of acres of natural forest down to grow this vanilla. And it's wrong. Vanilla should come from Mexico. You don't need any water brought in. It's where naturally it grows. That's what a food archaeologist does. And I have hundreds of examples of where I find these things, from pine nuts in Russia, which it's not a nut, it's a seed. Okay. So all of these things we boil down into a wonderful edible product that's good for you, good for the environment, and it makes sense.
And how did you first get into it? Like, what was it in your youth at some point that you decided, I want to go and find these things out? Was it by accident or a plan?
You know, I've really always loved food. I mean, I think, looking back into what the spark was, is it was just basic economics of working in Russia and realizing that I can get products out of there in the 90s for a lot less than when I sold it, I could make a really big profit.
And how did you end up in Russia?
You know, I went to school in Switzerland. I got a degree in economics from a standpoint of what's going to happen to a central planned economy and a capitalist economy. And it brought me to Russia in the early 90s, basically evaluating companies and seeing tremendous opportunity because all of these assets were controlled by the government. And so it was they were all nationalized. And so I was in the moment where these assets were becoming privatized. And that's where I thought, wow, this is an incredible opportunity. So I got into the vodka business early on.
Oh, okay.
And from that, it morphed into food from Russia. And then I started seeing, geez, there's opportunity all over the world from this. But initially, Russia was the biggest opportunity.
Oh, okay. And what was some of your favorite food from Russia at the time? Like when you first got into this, was it vodka came first and then the food, or the food and vodka? How did that happen?
You know what? Vodka in Russia was not downed like people thought. People weren't, people were drinking, but vodka was what you had as an aperitif. You had a little bit of vodka that you drank with your meal to help you digest.
Okay.
And some of the most delicious things, Russia is a massive country. 12, 13 time zones. And it borders Europe, and it also borders the United States. Alaska and Russia border each other.
Yeah.
So when you think of all the foods that are in Alaska, those same exact foods are in Russia, such as salmon and king crab. They're just called differently.
Right.
So in Moscow, just like you would have in New York, they were able to transfer those delicious fresh foods, and I just found the salmon to be absolutely delicious. But the difference is the way they serve the salmon were differently. They used dill.
Oh, okay.
And so I love the taste of the light dill cream sauce because sour cream and heavy cream was used.
Yeah.
So to have these roasted salmon with dill sauce is just unbelievable.
Yeah, grew up with that in Scandinavia too. So
Yes.
it's close enough to where Russia influenced Scandinavia, or maybe vice versa, who knows?
Yes.
So what are some of your other favorite foods?
I started really looking into Sri Lankan food. And I would say that my favorite food in the world is the Sri Lankan sauces, the pepper sauces, the crab, the tuna. Even though it's it's an island off the coast of southern India, it really has nothing to do with Indian food. And people throw Sri Lanka and India together. It is completely different. Well, Sri Lanka, it's where cinnamon comes from. It's where pepper and cardamom and cloves all naturally come from that island. They were taken out and they were made into different variations in part of the world. So the cinnamon that we get here, it's called Vietnamese or Chinese cinnamon. It is completely different than Ceylon cinnamon. The Ceylon cinnamon is very, very healthy for you. The Vietnam cinnamon, the Saigon cinnamon is absolutely not good for you. In fact, it's banned in Europe, but it's sold all over the United States.
Oh.
So that mix of food, the Sri Lankan crab, the pepper sauce crabs, the seafood that's made from there, and the vegan dishes are just astounding.
Oh, okay. Wow. Go Sri Lanka.
Yes.
I had no idea. So tell us about some other places. You mentioned Russia, Sri Lanka. What other places have you gone to that really impressed you?
Well, Mexico. And the reason I say Mexico, but Mexico's really 5 different regions of cuisine. The area of the Yucatan is completely different than northern Mexico, Sonora. The Yucatan in that region was responsible for where the tomato came from. That's getting into my food archaeology. In fact, on Columbus's 3rd voyage, he wrote of a canoe offering him red bulbs, where those red bulbs were the very first time a European ever came in contact with a tomato.
Wow.
A tomato is not Italian. So the first people to invent tomato sauce were the Mayans.
Oh, okay.
They weren't the Italians.
Wow, very interesting.
And that was in Costa Rica where he came across the tomato, was off the Costa Rican Caribbean coast.
Oh, okay. Wow. Now, do you have you're going to all these different countries, you're sampling food, sourcing food, and then bringing it back and spreading it out, bringing it back to America. Do you have a mission?
I do. And my mission is really that authenticity. Where do things come from? the flavor, the tastes, and to find those and bring them here. Because in California, this is a desert. Where everything is grown in this state, it's grown in a desert.
Right.
There's no nutrients in the soil. There is no water. So everything you're having here is environmentally destructive and unflavorful and tasteful. So I like going to countries like Costa Rica, where when you buy a pineapple in Costa Rica, or you buy a tomato, or you buy hearts of palm, you're doing a couple things. You're A, getting an incredible tasty food because that's where its origin is from, and B, you are helping save the planet and the environment. Why? 98% of Costa Ricans' electricity is renewable sources. They aren't using oil to produce electricity. They have large amounts of hydroelectric power because it's in a tropical zone, so there's a lot of rain and a lot of rivers running down, and they use the hydroelectric power from that to create electricity. So when you're buying a pineapple, which it's heavily processed, use a lot of electricity to clean it, wash it, package it, you're using electricity that is not pollution.
Right.
Also, that pineapple is grown in volcanic soil and used with natural rain. So you're not pumping the water there. It's rain is using bringing the water. You're not transporting large amounts of chemicals. Hawaii, unfortunately, you go and you look on the island of Maui, you see this huge polluting, massive generation plant using oil, and where the smokestacks go, you just follow them up in the mountain, and all the mountain is denuded of vegetation where the pollution is going off of that. You're watching it with your own eyes. They're having to bring in tremendous amount of fertilizer to grow pineapples there. It's polluting the ground. So the flavor is just not there anymore, sadly to say.
Oh, okay.
So I like to look at areas of the world that help the environment and then provide tremendous flavor.
It's a great mission.
Yes, and I can go on and on with hundreds of products like that, from vanilla to pine nuts.
And I'm sure that's what you're going to do going forward with Truth in Food.
That's right. The Truth in Food will give you the truth.
So what do you know about superfoods, and what is superfoods?
You know what? A superfood is really that item that you eat that provides you with a tremendous amount of minerals, vitamins. It really provides your body something that is actually acting like a medicine. Mm-hmm. And I've always said, you know what a doctor should do? Why don't they just prescribe an orange for you? Why are they always prescribing a chemical, vitamin C? There is no reason in the world they should be giving you a tablet of vitamin C when you can eat an orange,
right,
when you can have acai, when you can provide your body with the natural elements that it normally would take. Do you think they were prescribing vitamin C during the time of the Egyptians and the Romans? Absolutely not.
Right.
But they survived.
Yeah.
Why? Because they knew some of the home remedies at the time were actually more beneficial for you.
If I can put in a request, I'd love you to talk about acai. I heard that's an incredible superfood. Maybe you can bring that up in a future show.
I would love to. In fact, there is a gentleman I know from Brazil that's importing some of the best acai out there, and I'll ask him where it comes from, what is it? In fact, I know it's a berry, but I don't even know where it comes from. That's a great, we'll do that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. What do you know about food from Sweden?
Very interesting you ask. Okay, I've traveled to Sweden several times, and the most interesting thing that I have had in Sweden is actually a caviar called Kalix.
Okay.
And there's a city far in the north that's called Kalix, and there's two rivers that meet. And the fish from the sea go up there and spawn, and out comes the most delicious caviar I've ever had in my life, even better than Russian caviar.
Okay.
It's golden, and they actually serve it during the Nobel Prize ceremony. It's one of the dishes they serve. And there's something called DOP, which basically is the source that you cannot call this anywhere else. Now, Italy has hundreds of them, such as Parmesan cheese, champagne.
Right.
Tequila is another one. Well, the only food that Sweden has that designation is Kalix caviar. It's that good.
Is it with an X or is it with an S? Isn't it Kalles caviar?
It is.
Kalles caviar.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I grew up with. It comes in a tube and you squeeze it on your sandwiches, for example.
Yes, and they put the name out, but the real original one with the fish that's in that part of Sweden is actually very expensive.
Right.
Now, why is that? Well, they tested the two rivers that meet right where the fish spawn. And one of the rivers has a large amount of gold in the water, natural gold. And the other river has a large amount of silver.
Oh, wow.
And so they who knows, but you know what? Those two rivers coming together with a lot of gold and silver over the years going into the water, you're basically getting a caviar that the fish are swimming and putting in trace elements of gold and silver in there.
Wow. I feel rich being a Swede.
Yes.
Now, in other parts of the world, I've heard that in some parts of the world, people live longer because of the diet. I've heard, for example, that in the country of Italy, there are certain areas, I think, where people eat a specific diet and it makes them live longer than other people in other parts of the world.
Absolutely. And there's a couple things there. One of them is on the coast. When you look at people, they live near the ocean. And part of that is just the air you breathe. I mean,
right.
People don't realize your lungs is your life, your engine. It's the air you breathe really provides that longevity because it's pulling up that oxygen and putting it into your bloodstream and giving you life. There is a town called Acciaroli in Italy. And what's amazing about this town is it has the per capita, the oldest people anywhere on the face of the earth. I have been there. In fact, I recently got back. And it's amazing to see active 100-year-old people there.
Wow.
Fishing, singing, running around town, laughing and happy. And there was two universities that did a tremendous study, one in Rome and the other at UCSD in San Diego. What they found was the cuisine that was there and some of the herbs. And one of these herbs that we have, what they do is put it in their water and the just escaped me. So it's the Italian word for it. It'll come back to me. But these are the things that keep people alive.
Okay. And I'm sure that we can look forward to hear more about that on your upcoming programs. You'll bring that up, and I'm sure have that as a topic in one of your future shows.
Definitely.
Now, so canned food, canned soup, things that are not fresh, it's very convenient. But talk a little bit about how much better fresh food is and why it's so important that we get as much fresh food as possible.
The reason is basically when you put something in a can, there used to be something called botulism. And so that was where you would eat something and it would develop bacteria in there and kill you. So you have to heat up that can. You have to heat that can up to over, I think, 100 or 200 degrees and kill everything in that can so bacteria won't continue to grow and you can eat that. It's called pasteurization.
Okay.
So the problem with that is you're killing all the natural live ingredients in that can. So when you're eating something healthy and you're eating something fresh, all of that good gut bacteria is surrounding that, and it's good for you. Your stomach is your second brain. What goes on in your stomach, it's filled with positive bacteria and bad bacteria, and that is a huge battle taking place in every single body. And the victory is for your mind and for your health is to overcome the bad bacteria that's sitting in your stomach. The way to do that is to have fresh, healthy food with good bacteria on there, and that goes into your system and fights off the bad bacteria. Eating canned food, it's not good. All of that good bacteria has been killed.
Right.
So you're left with just the solid matter and the flavor of salt and chemicals that are in there.
It may fill you up, but it won't give you any health benefits.
It will not. Look, it'll give you substance. There's vitamins and some minerals in there, but it's just not the same.
Yeah.
You know, it's just laziness. Every time someone's opening a can of something, it's just really like you disrespect yourself that much that you're eating out of a can. Look, I know people do it for convenience, and once in a while I get it, but come on, all the time.
Right. And I think that, this kind of education that you're providing here right now help people understand why it's so important. And I say that I haven't really been around that much education before, so I'm a little ignorant when it comes to that, and happy to learn from you and can't wait for our next fresh meal together.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I was earlier talking about is rosemary. That is the thing in Italy that they realize that keeps everybody long. So they actually put a sprig of rosemary in bottled water. Incredibly healthy for you. Whatever that chemical is in the sap of that tree is life-changing. So why would you go and buy dried old rosemary when you can buy fresh cut rosemary, chop it up, and they put it over everything? Everything has rosemary in it, and it's what's keeping them to 100 years old. That's the solution. Okay.
Wow. Thank goodness for rosemary.
Yes.
So what is the most bizarre food you've ever had?
So that's a very interesting question. I mean, bizarre that everyone could relate to would probably be grasshoppers in Mexico.
Okay.
And ant eggs, which is called escamole. And escamole is called Mexican caviar because they're white eggs about the size of caviar, and it's a delicacy down there.
Oh, okay.
And you could have it with garlic and things like that. So those are probably...
What does grasshoppers taste like?
You know what?
And how are they served?
So grasshoppers are... So a camal is basically a flat piece of iron, and they toast them. So they take them and they put them over the iron and toast them. Mm-hmm. So they're crunchy. So they basically, doesn't taste anything bad or good. They're just tremendous protein. And this is something that the indigenous have been eating even during the pre-Columbian days. To me, it's almost the future of food. I mean, there's a whole discussion on serving insects and something that's renewable, something that is very protein healthy.
Yeah.
So they are good for the environment. They are filled with tremendous protein. It's just people think, insects are disgusting. I'm not talking about eating a cockroach.
Right.
A grasshopper is something a little better.
Yeah. Okay.
But then right now people will see it, but I think in the future people will think, oh my God, I'm eating Jiminy Cricket. Let's not eat a grasshopper.
Right, exactly. Jiminy Cricket with rosemary.
Yeah.
That's a nice couple for you. So you mentioned earlier that you placed a lot of food in different stores. So talk about some of the things that you have placed and what are they and where can people buy them?
So I have traveled with the buyers of several large companies, one of them Whole Foods and the other Trader Joe's. So right now, if you walk into Trader Joe's, you can purchase my harissa from Tunisia. I went to harissa, I sourced it, and we placed it into Trader Joe's. Also sardines from the Mediterranean. To me, Mediterranean sardines are much tastier than Pacific sardines. Mm-hmm. One thinks of an anchovy and a sardine are disgusting, but the sardines in the Mediterranean, because the water's a little warmer and a little saltier, the bones are very, very brittle. They're not as tough.
Oh, okay.
And the fish has a natural higher salinity content. So when you're eating sardines, you're actually chewing the fish and the bones at once, and it's incredibly healthy for you. The bones of a sardine has so much natural calcium to build up your own bones and to give your body so much strength. But a lot of times people think, oh, it's gross eating it. Not with herbs de Provence. We put herbs de Provence and fill it with 100% natural olive oil. It's delicious, and it's less expensive than a bag of potato chips.
Oh, wow. Okay, and a lot healthier, of course.
Oh, big time.
So now we've talked a lot about food. What about liquor, spirits?
Oh, boy. That's another thing I know a lot about. I recently just got back from a trip to Scotland. A client paid me to buy 200 barrels of whiskey and go all over Scotland whiskey tasting. And I can really get into the different dynamics of whiskey. Well, let me tell you one truth. Every single bottle of whiskey you drink has food coloring in it. You are getting fooled thinking that this dark bottle of whiskey is taking the color because it's been sitting in a cask for 2 or 3 years. Sorry, whiskey comes out clear, and all of that color is food coloring to sucker you into thinking that the darker it is, the more expensive it is. Why do they add food coloring? Basically, because every single time that whiskey comes out of a barrel, it is different coloring. So they want you, the consumer, to see one color at one certain level and have consistency.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Did you know that?
No, I had no idea.
So these are the fun discoveries, and I've got thousands of them. You know, the same thing with mezcal. I have a mezcal in the marketplace. I did a mezcal for Trader Joe's. In fact, that was 10 years ago before anyone ever knew what mezcal was. Yeah. I was in that business, and Trader Joe's had the first mezcal.
What's the difference between mezcal and tequila?
The cactus and the region. So Weber Blue Agave makes tequila, and that can only come from a certain region in Mexico. Everybody thinks it's Jalisco. Well, that's part of it. It can come from the state of Michoacan. It can come from a little bit of those regional states. The majority of it is. But you use Weber Blue Agave for tequila, and you use a cactus called maguey for mezcal.
I see. Okay.
And I still am a traditionalist. I think the worm should be in a bottle of mezcal.
So I got one final question for you. So as you're traveling around the world, you come to countries you've never been to before, and the food that they're serving may not look appetizing to you at the moment. Do you ever go to a different country and go, man, I wish they had a McDonald's?
You know, it's funny you say that. I mean, you hear everybody bashing McDonald's and this and that. I'm not one of those people. I'll tell you why. I really want companies to get better. I mean, they have such a large distribution system that what I like to do is I'll actually go to a McDonald's in a different part of the world, and I'll tell you why. Do you ever hear someone getting food poisoning or sick in McDonald's? No.
No.
And the reason is their food traceability, their network of suppliers and providing food to McDonald's all over the world is the safest that you'll ever find. So if I'm in a part of the world and I'm hungry, I've gotten sick so many times because I've dashed into somewhere and the food was not stored well. And I'm talking about countries that you just cannot believe that a McDonald's is there.
Right.
And McDonald's does have healthy choices. You just have to choose them. I mean, you're not going in there buying a Big Mac all the time, but in other countries they have great salads, they have really good choices, and I like to eat there because I know I'm not going to get sick. Now, do I think McDonald's has a long way to go to change a lot of things on their menu? Absolutely, and I would love to be here to help them do that.
Yeah, maybe you will, John. Maybe you will. My name is Swedish Egil, and thank you for joining us today on Truth in Food. This is John Robert Sutton right here, and for more information about this program, you can visit his website, suttonselects.com, or follow John on social media at Sutton Selects. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Now let's go eat.
Well, let's go right now. I'm starving.
Yeah, me too.